Okay, it should be recording. Great. Okay. All right, let's begin. So on your source sheet, we have the first two sources are this account of the Korban Pesach as it appears in Sefer Shemot in Exodus chapter 12. That's source 1. And our second source is the account of Korban Pesach as it appears in Sefer Devarim, in the book of Deuteronomy. Okay. If this was, we had a lot of time, I would break you all into chavruta, and I would say come up with some differences, okay, in these two accounts, which I'm not going to do right now. But I'm going to give you like a little bit of time, okay, just to read over. They're long sources. I didn't give you all of Exodus chapter 12. I cut out a few verses, but I gave you most of Exodus chapter 12, and I gave you the first half of Deuteronomy 16, first 12 verses. So just take a few moments, look them over, and try to come up with some of the differences. Okay. I guess you could even note them in the chat, or you could. All right. So I'm gonna start. If you noticed any. Okay, so let's hope this works. Scroll down in your source sheet. It says there are several halachic contradictions. Okay, that means there are literary differences. There are maybe differences of language, but there are also like legal differences. There are differences in how this very foundational Paschal sacrifice is meant to be carried out, as it's described in Exodus 12 and as it's described in Deuteronomy. So if these links work, you should be able to click. It says click here to see Exodus 12:5 compared to Deuteronomy 16:2. So click there. It should open. Very good. It should take you to a new page. On one side, you should have Exodus 12:5. On the other side, you should have Deuteronomy 16. So notice any difference? You can go back and forth. Okay. 16:2 and 12:5. Exodus 12:5, 16:2. So what's the difference? So someone want to unmute himself or herself and say what you see is different? This is an easy one, guys.
And the kinds of animals that are listed seem to be different.
Wonderful, wonderful. Okay, exactly. The types of animals. I see two of you. Were you able to open eventually the link? Is there advice? Because somebody else just wrote to me and had trouble.
I clicked the link you sent me in Facebook Messenger.
Okay.
If someone joined late, the link won't be there because like
let me put it in the
old, so you might just want to repost it.
Right, okay. Let me try one more time. Somebody's even having, yeah.
Weird.
So,
maybe I'll. Yeah, it could be different. Yeah. I can. What can I do? I can. The individual. I don't know if I preserve your privacy. I'll send you I'll send you a Facebook Messenger also, just in case for some reason that works better. Right. Okay. So in Exodus, what type of animal are you allowed to use? A lamb. In Deuteronomy, it says, it says setamim, okay, a lamb without blemish. And in Deuteronomy 16:2, it says son ubakar. Okay, son ubakar sounds different. If you go your back arrow, you're back on my source sheet. Okay, that's one. Next, click here to see Exodus 12:7 compared to Deuteronomy 16:2. Same verse. What's the difference there? Click on that link. What do you got? So want to unmute himself or herself and say, how's that different? Anyone? It should be a link. So when it says click here, if you click here, it should open a new window with 2 columns of text. So you compare one to the other. That's what I'm trying for. If it works for me. If it works for you, if it's not working, I can just do share screen. But if it does work for you, that's a little bit easier. Okay. So what I'm getting at is in Exodus, you take the blood and you put it on your doorposts. And in Deuteronomy, what do you take? You slaughter it in the Beit HaMikdash. And okay, so no, right? Nothing at all about. So presumably, right, like any other sacrifice, the blood goes on the mizbeach. Okay, nothing about the blood being on the doorposts. Okay. The place where the Lord will choose to establish His name, that means the Beit HaMikdash. In fact, and it says again in verse 5 in Deuteronomy, you can scroll down there. You can't slaughter it wherever you want. It has to be the place where God is choosing. That's the place. Okay. You do your back arrow. You're back in the source sheet again. Next, click here to compare Exodus 12, 8-9 with Deuteronomy 16, 7. These are just, again, back and forth, me saying, click on the link. You should see it. So what's the deal? Oh, this is a good one. This is important. What do you do with the Korban Pesach in Exodus? What do you do with it?
You eat it.
You what? You eat it, but you first you do eat it. You eat it in both. You eat it. What do you do before you eat it in Exodus?
Fire roast it.
You fire, and in Deuteronomy you
Cook it and eat it.
right. So bishal. So it says like so bishul generally means not fire roasting, right? Bishul maybe means boiling or something, cooking with liquid. So you can reconcile. You can say bishul in Deuteronomy is the same as tzliah, the roasting in Exodus, but they're really two different words, and generally in Torah they mean different things. Maybe it seems that some people using on phones have trouble seeing with the link. So I'm seeing in two columns. So I'm going to do share screen. Okay. And that should work. Share screen. Okay. See if that works. Okay.
Mhm.
Look at that. See, that's what it's supposed to look like. Is that nice? Okay. Look at that. So in Exodus 12, if you have on your left, you have Deuteronomy 6 on your right. Okay. And there you are. So Deuteronomy 16, you shall cook, okay? And in Exodus, it is roasted. Okay, I'm gonna go back. So, okay, next, click here to compare Exodus 12:7 and Deuteronomy 12:27. So what's this about? 12:7 is, sorry, is that what I said? 12. What did I say? Sorry, I forgot what I just read and go back. Yeah, 12:7 and 12, sorry, two 12s. 12:7 and 12:27. 12:7 is, again, you take the blood and you put it on the mezuzot. And in 12:27, it tells us that where does blood go for a korban? It always goes on the mizbeach. Okay, so that's also, again, so in Exodus, blood goes on the door. In Deuteronomy, blood goes on, always on the mizbeach. It's a sacrifice. The blood gets put on the mizbeach. Okay. And finally, see here for elements of Exodus 12 that are lacking in Deuteronomy 16. Let's see if this works. Bing, 1, 2, 3. Okay. Exodus 12:8. You eat the meat, and that night, tzli'esh matzot umatzot al morim yachlu. You eat the korban pesach with matzah and maror. In Deuteronomy, there's no reference to maror. Okay. 12:3. Speak to Israel more about Selach Chodesh. Oh yeah, I have to take the korban pesach on the 10th of Nisan. Has to be selected early. You select it for your family on the 10th. That detail is absent in Deuteronomy. Finally, Exodus 12:11. This says you eat it in very, very fast. Zone, right? You have to eat it with your clothing on and everything ready, because this korban has to be eaten b'chipa zone in great haste. That's a detail that's absent in Deuteronomy. So, and there are others. So there are other contradictions. There are other details in one that are not in the other. These are some of the big ones. Okay, we did. We go back to my case. These are seven. So how do we understand? How do we make sense of these differences? So source 9 is the Mishram Sachim. I could have given you Rashi. I could have given you many other other sources as well. The Mishnah here introduces a phrase that, sorry, who's calling? Sorry. The Mishnah introduces a phrase, Mabin Pesach Mitzrayim LePesach Dorot. Actually, sorry. Since I'm doing screen share, I can't see comments. So if you're asking questions, I can't see them right now. So if you have a question, I'm going to pause right now, unmute yourself and ask a question. If something wasn't clear. I went very fast over a bunch of things. Do you have questions or comments on what we've seen so far? Okay. Okay. Well, I can actually view the chat. I can't view the chat. Okay, great. Great. Now I can see the chat. Okay. So, okay, the chat is again visible to me. Okay, I'm going to go on. So, Mishnah Pesachim characterizes Chazal's understanding of these differences. These are not new discoveries. The fact that the Korban Pesach is described differently in Exodus and Deuteronomy is not something that was discovered recently. Chazal were aware of that, and the distinction that they give is one that makes a lot of sense. They say there's Pesach Mitzrayim, the Korban Pesach as was brought and eaten in Egypt, the night preceding the Exodus from Egypt, and there's Pesach Dorot, there's the Pesach of the generations, how this mitzvah is ritualized as an annual korban observed year in, year out, and that explains the differences. So the blood on the door, that was a special rule for Egypt. That wasn't a rule for forever, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, that's Chazal's approach. And if you learn Rashi, Rashi takes that approach as well. Okay, and you can see that in this Mishnah. You can see that in lots of others. So let's read the Mishnah since it's here. Okay, Mavin Pesach Mitzrayim. So what's the difference between Pesach in Egypt and Pesach for the generation? Pesach Mitzrayim, mikacho mi be'asor. You have to select the Korban Pesach on the 10th. V'ta'un haza'ah ba'agudat ezov al hamashkof yal shem. So you put the blood on the lintel and on the 2 doorposts. And it has to be eaten in great haste. And one day, Pesach Dora, no egg called Shiva. Okay. Whereas Pesach of generation, you have 7 days to eat the Korban Pesach for the generations, and you don't have these other details about putting the blood on the doorpost, et cetera, et cetera. So that's very good, right? That seems to work. But there's some problems with this understanding. It doesn't answer all of the contradictions, and it doesn't seem to, it's not easily reconciled with Pshat. So click here for some counterexamples to this. So click here. What do we get? Bam. Three little counterexamples. What do we got here? Yeah, look at this. Ushmartem et hazavar hazeh l'chok lecha uvanecha ad olam. Okay, this is 1224, right? You shall observe this forever. There's no indication in Sefer Shemot that the Korban Pesach that's observed in Egypt the night before the Exodus is anything other than a perpetual, permanent mitzvah. And look at it. And verse 26, 12:26. Right? Your children are going to ask you, what are you doing? What are your children seeing in Exodus 12:26 when they ask you, what are you doing? They're seeing you do the Korban Pesach as described in that chapter, which includes all these details, eating it in great haste with your belt, putting the blood on the lintel, and then your kids will ask you. Pshat in Exodus chapter 12 this is going to be a mitzvah forever, which is generally our assumption when the Torah gives us a mitzvah, is that's going to be forever. Here it says, you're going to do this for you and your children, do this forever. And your children are going to ask about this mitzvah that was just described in this chapter. So the approach of Chazal to say, these details in 12, in Sefer Shemot and Sefer Devarim are in conflict, to say, well, one was for Egypt and one was forever, you have to come to some understanding of why the Torah doesn't seem to say that explicitly. Everyone with me so far? Anyone's not with me want to say something? Because I can't see all your faces. Some of you have.
I had a question. What's the meaning of the hak in the 1224 when it says you shall observe this as an institution?
Yeah.
What?
Chok can mean a rule, a law, a statute, right? There are a number of mitzvah in the Torah that are described explicitly as a chok, and there's a whole history of what that word may or may not mean in later rabbinic thought. But I think it's a fine, you shall keep this, meaning everything above as some Are you suggesting maybe, I guess you should say, you shall keep this as some rules in the Torah, but you're not going to do it this way? I guess, is that what you're suggesting, or is that?
I'm curious if anyone's interpreted that word to mean that.
Something like that. Yeah, I don't think so. That's you know, that might work. And yeah, okay. Anyone else want to offer a reaction or rejection or a question? Okay. It seems that sorry, another text came in. It seems that Ibn Ezra maybe was aware. I have a link here. What does Ibn Ezra say? Ibn Ezra says, Ushmartem, Rabim chashvu ki nitinat adam al hamashkov yashtei mezuzot chiyuv ledorot, bevor ki davar zeh samuch el likichat ha'ezov v'tfilato v'od ki katuv achar ken asher pasach al batei ben Israel v'derech hasvar nachon haya lulei kabbalat hamet hanigmeret. So it's sort of saying that, you know, you read the Pshat, it seems to suggest that all of the details as described in Exodus are part of this eternal mitzvah that we're supposed to do together forever. It's just that, you know, it's not the case. We know that it's not the case. And it says, you shall, hadavar hazeh, this thing you shall do forever. That just means like shechting korban Pesach. Okay, so when it says all these detail, do this thing forever. Do this thing forever is referring not to everything, but referring to just just the korban Pesach itself. So that's how Ibn Ezra. So I think Ibn Ezra, I don't know. I think he's like he's solving this problem, right? He's telling us that Chazal's approach is not necessarily the simplest way to read the verses. To say Exodus 12 was intended just for Egypt, not forever. Okay, let's go back. The first traditional Jewish scholar to offer interpretation of Exodus 12, Deuteronomy 16, in a way that is different from this approach of Chazal of Pesach of Egypt, Pesach of generations, by David Zvi Hoffman. And he says there's a story in the Torah in our relationship with this mitzvah. What happened between Exodus 12 and Deuteronomy 16? Well, we left Egypt and we got a few mitzvot, okay? What do we get? Intervening mitzvot, bing. We got Leviticus, Leviticus 17, which tells us you're not allowed to shecht animals outside of the Beit HaMikdash, outside the Mishkan. You can't just offer your own sacrifices. We have Numbers chapter 9, which tells us that it's something called Pesach Sheni, because since you can only shecht the Korban Pesach in the central location, there might be some people who are too far away, they don't make it in time. And so there's the institution of Pesach Sheni. Then we get Deuteronomy 12. Deuteronomy 12 tells us that we're actually allowed to eat meat that's not a korban. Okay, that's why we're like, it used to be, it seems that between Leviticus 9 and Leviticus 17, Deuteronomy 12, the only meat that we could eat was the korbanot that were brought in the central location, which eventually is the Beis HaMikdash. Deuteronomy 12 says you can eat meat, you can eat civilian, secular meat that's not a korban. And so once that becomes true, you might think that we go back to the korban Pesach as well, being slaughtered at home where the blood goes on the door. And so the Torah comes to tell us in Deuteronomy 16, no, don't think that. Despite the meat-eating revolution of Deuteronomy 12, even in Deuteronomy, even Korban Pesach is still a Korban. It's checked in the Beit HaMikdash. The blood goes on the Mizbeach, okay, and you just eat it at home, but you don't no blood on the door anymore. That's Tzvi Hoffman's approach, okay? He's responding to the emergence of modern biblical criticism, academic biblical criticism, which saw these contradictions and said this is their outcome of multiple authors over multiple times with diverse perspectives. Tzvi Hoffman was defending a more traditional belief that the Torah came from Moshe, but to make sense of these contradictions, he says there's an evolution, there's a progression of the mitzvot of the Torah during the lifetime of Moshe. First, we had a ritual that was done in our homes in Egypt the night before we left Egypt. In the desert, we received the mitzvah of the book of Leviticus, and we're prohibited from shechting animals at home. Okay, I guess that means we can't do the Korban Pesach at home anymore. Blood doesn't go over the door. Blood has to be poured on the mizbeach and the altar in the temple. And then Deuteronomy 12 says, oh, we can actually, here, you're allowed to eat meat on your own. Doesn't have to be a korban. And Deuteronomy 16 is saying that doesn't apply to the Korban Pesach. That's David Tzvi Hoffman's approach. Questions or reactions to that? Guys, if you were in person, I would not be this, I would make you say something. Okay. That's fine. The Seder. I'm gonna move on then, okay?
I mean, I'll ask, it seems, well, yeah, I'll ask the question. I mean, you're probably going here next, but then the question is, well, why did, once we were allowed to eat meat, why did God not then revert back to the Korban Pesach at home? Or is that where you're going next?
It's not, but maybe it is. It's not a bad question. It might be where I think I'm going to address that question from a different angle. So that's good. Yeah, maybe through this action, that's a different way of phrasing the question. I'm going to ask and answer. And I think, I guess the question. Look, David Tzvi Hoffman doesn't. His approach doesn't. I should say more, but I didn't say anything. But David Tzvi Hoffman was a German rabbi, very important German Orthodox rabbi. He died, I believe, in 1921. Okay, so he was. He lived in Berlin. He was the senior rabbi at the Berlin Rabbiner Seminar, the modern Orthodox Rabbinical Seminary in Berlin. He was also an academic. He wrote a academic book on the Shulchan Aruch and was very, very, well trained in, scholarly rabbinics. As he was also an important posek and communal leader, and published a volume of Shailot and Shuvot, which are very worth studying and important. And he wrote like a very, again, significant, like kind of Orthodox defense of the beliefs of Orthodoxy against some of these type of deconstructed biblical critical approaches. So that was his agenda in offering this approach. He doesn't answer every contradiction. So he answers some of the really big ones. He doesn't answer each of the contradictions. So I guess you could still go back to him and say, but why this difference and that contradiction? He doesn't really explain that. And I think, Charles, you were hinting at, or maybe you weren't, but I think your question raises the other question: how does our theologies, how's our vision, our religious vision, our religious worldview accommodate mitzvot that change over the course of the Torah? Right, there's sort of a why question that's unanswered. Why would God give us mitzvot in stages over the course of Moshe's career? I think that's unanswered by his approach. And I think that's, I don't know. I think because we usually think of, we get mitzvot in a certain verse and we stick with it and that's it. So why do we, right? What's this development about? So let me just go back here. This works. So I'm going back to my source sheet, which is, here we go. So Chezi Cohen, I've quoted his book a few times. He published his book Shitat Tzimurot. I made reference to it a number of times over the last year or so. He thinks his whole theory of biblical interpretation is to really drill down on the evolution in our consciousness that occurred during 40 years of Moshe's leadership. And we weren't the same people the night before the Exodus as we were 40 years later at the end when Moshe was teaching us Sefer Dvarim. So this preserves a, quote unquote Orthodox belief that the Torah is from Moshe. Moshe gave us the entire Torah in his lifetime. But it notes that Moshe, at the end of his life, who taught us Sefer Dvarim, was not the same, didn't give Sefer Dvarim to the same people who experienced the events of Sefer Shemot. Right? It was their children and grandchildren who received Sefer Dvarim 40 years later. And so the Korban Pesach, as it's described in Sefer Shemot is a ritual that was appropriate for a group of slaves who didn't know God, who didn't know mitzvot, on the eve of our freedom. And the Korban Pesach, as it's described in Devarim, is a mitzvah appropriate for a more mature community that has had 40 years of living with Moshe, of observing mitzvot, of coming to know God. Okay, and in fact, we see a number of examples of this change in perspective. Okay, so just I have a link here. See here for the Miracle Bay. Okay, so what do we got? Yeah, throughout the book of Exodus, there's like a lot of emphasis on miracles. Okay, 11:9. God, like there's going to be a lot of wonders and marvels in Egypt. Okay, Exodus 12. I'm going to pass through. I'm going to exercise judgment. We do nothing, right? We stay at home, and God exercises judgment throughout the land of Egypt. And that's what the blood is at. The blood in the doorpost, as we famously write. This holiday, right? And the plague will not destroy you when I strike Egypt. So it's very miraculous. God is active and smiting. We're entirely passive. And this is how the exodus from Egypt took place. And in general, in the early stages, you can compare the wars, right? God fights this battle for us. And the earliest battles, right? God is there fighting for us, right? In Sefer Shemot, we fight with Amalek. Moshe raises his hands and we prevail. God is with us, right? And you see the early battles in Sefer Midbar, much more miraculous. By the end of Sefer Midbar, we're fighting our own battles, right? Think about, end of Sefer Midbar, Moshe is, having strategy and tactics and sending scouts, and we're doing it. We're on our own. We're prepared to enter Israel and on our own. Moshe's staff. Think of how many times Moshe's staff appears in the book of Exodus. He uses it all the time. And over the course of the Torah, Moshe uses his staff less and less and less. And in fact, the final time he uses it, he hits the rock he wasn't supposed to. That's another trend in the Torah, right? God's miraculous intervention on our behalf is less and less and less. And we see also a shift in doorposts between Exodus and Deuteronomy. There's my link here. We see it in the Korban Pesach, of course. In Exodus, the blood of the Korban Pesach goes in the door. In Deuteronomy, the blood of the Korban Pesach does not go on the door. So where do we see a reversal? We see a reversal in the mitzvah of mezuzah. Okay, look at Deuteronomy 6. You should know these verses, okay? And press these words upon your children. Recite them when you stay at home, when you are away, when you lie down, when you get up. Bind them as a sign on your hand. And a symbol on your forehead. What's that referring to? Someone unmute yourself and tell us. That is the mitzvah of
fill in.
Fill in, very good. Not all at once. Great, thank you. And what's immediately follows the mitzvah, and also write them on the doorposts. So mezuzah is this parallel mitzvah that goes alongside tefillin, about remembering the unity of God, remembering God. Exodus 13, we also have tefillin. Serves a sign in your hand, as a reminder on your forehead, in order the teaching of the Lord may be in your mouth, that with a mighty hand the Lord freed you from Egypt. No mention of mezuzah. Okay, so the mitzvah of tefillin appears twice in Sefer Shemot, appears twice in Devarim. In Devarim it appears alongside mezuzah. In Shemot it doesn't. Korban Pesach appears in Shemot with blood in the doorpost. In Deuteronomy, Korban Pesach appears without the blood in the doorpost. So in some ways, it's like the mezuzah is replacing the blood on the doorpost. we have a Korban Pesach and a mezuzah. They had a Korban Pesach with blood on the door. And I think in some ways, a mezuzah is like the opposite of the blood on the door. The blood on the door was the way we experienced Pesach in this time of total miraculous intervention. We were shut in our homes while the plague raged outside, and God kept us safe because of this blood on the door. A mezuzah is something that we ourselves write. And we put it on the door, not so God will protect us, but so that we remember God and what God expects of us. Okay, that's the last source on the page. This is the Rambam. Okay, famous Rambam. Famous meaning I've heard it before. Okay, but now if you haven't seen it before, you'll be able to say it's famous too. Minhag pashut shekotvim mezuzah min b'chutz k'neged harevach she'ben parsha l'parsha shadai. Okay, it's a custom you write shadai on the outside of the mezuzah, so it's rolled up and shin daled yud is written on the outside of the mezuzah. And this word's written on the outside. The practice is unobjective. Who cares? It's on the outside of the mezuzah. It's not where the actual writing of the mezuzah itself is. However, they who write the names of angels and holy names, some biblical texts or inscriptions, as one writes and seals, they put it within the mezuzah. You add these sort of mystical things to the mezuzah itself. These are among those who have no portion in the world to come. That's pretty severe, right? Pretty harsh language there. For these fools, not only fail to fulfill the commandment, they're missing out on the mitzvah, but they treat an important precept that expresses the unity of God, the love of God, the worship of God, as if it were an amulet to promote their own personal interests. For according to their foolish minds, the mezuzah is something that will secure for them advantage in the vanities of the world. Okay. Wow. And that's not what mezuzah is. Mezuzah is about reminding us of the unity of God. So it's about us and our recollection, like our remembrance. We write it, we put it up, we see it, and hopefully our consciousness is purified and elevated by the mezuzah and our awareness of the unity of God and our, loyalty and devotion that we owe God. So I want to say something about Passover this year, okay? In some ways, our experience of Pesach is evoking the experience of, actually, I'm going to stop screen sharing, okay? Because I want to see the rest of your faces, okay. In some ways, our experience of Pesach this year evokes this memory of this primordial Pesach, right, of being in Egypt. It's frightening outside. There's literally a plague outside, a deadly plague outside. And we're huddled in our homes to protect ourselves. And that seems very similar to Pesach Mitzrayim. But I actually think that it's really not the case, because we are a people who has, we benefited from 40 years of Moshe's teaching, and hopefully we've benefited from thousands of years since then of studying Torah and internalizing some of what the Torah wants us to do. And I think our doorposts don't have blood on them. Our doorposts have mezuzah on them. And the mezuzah, I think, is the opposite of the blood on the door. The blood on the door is, it's a stage of our religious development in which we were entirely passive, and God was entirely active on our behalf. And we did these rituals just as almost like magical means to protect ourselves. The mezuzah is something we write that reflects God's desire that we should act in the world as best we can, independently, doing what we intuit God wants us to do. So we don't have that miraculous intervention of God which is sometimes hard, right? So it'd be nice to have God fighting for us and protecting us the way God did in Sefer Shemot. But God doesn't do that because we already know everything we need to know in order to know how to act. Our staying home, our small, truncated, maybe a little bit lonely and a little bit sad Seders this year, we're doing that not out of fear, but to protect others. That's like a mezuzah, right? It's about like, we know something really true about the world. We know that we should be protecting human life, promoting the flourishing of human health. Right? That's, I think, clearly what God wants us, like, how to act in the world right now. And so we're home because we have a mezuzah on the door. We remember there's one God who created all human beings, who wants human beings to live in health and to flourish and to be safe and to be protected. And that's where we're going to be by ourselves. Not because we're huddled in fear of a God who's acting miraculously on our behalf, but because God taught us what to do. And we know that what God wants us to do is to stay within, to protect not only ourselves, but also protect others. So I think even though there are some superficial similarities between our here and the Pesach of our ancestors in Egypt, and look, in some ways we're always supposed to, right? We are supposed to feel as though we just left Egypt. I think our celebration of Pesach has the advantage of having grown with Moshe Rabbeinu's teaching and grown with centuries and centuries observing mitzvot and teaching Torah, and we bring God's message into the world, okay? By acting with responsibility and with ethics and with that awareness that every human being is created in the image of one God. So, we don't need blood on our doors. We need mezuzah on our doors this year for Pesach. I hope that you can find moments of joy, even with all the challenges over the holiday. And I think, if there are moments of sadness, of not being with friends, not being with relatives, and which I think is natural and appropriate, I hope that sadness can be channeled into just pride in the knowledge that you're doing the right thing and the responsible thing, and bringing God's, again, message of mercy and compassion for human life, actualizing it into the world. So with that, I want to wish you a Chag Kasher v'Sameach. Thank you so much for joining this Zoom Shabbat Hagadol shiur. I hope it worked out okay for you all. I guess I will stop the recording. Oh, okay, yes. We'll stop the recording, and then if you can have any questions, you can do so, okay? Right. Okay.